All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another Center for Agricultural Profitability webinar from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. I'm Ryan Evans with the Center for Agricultural Profitability, and this is part of our weekly webinar series, and we're typically live here at this time every Thursday at noon Central. And as always, you can find a schedule of all of our upcoming webinars and an archive of every webinar recording from the past 4 years on our center's website at cap.unl.edu. Today, we'll be taking a look at the uniqueness of farms and ranches where personal and professional lives intertwine. Successfully navigating family business relations requires often a delicate balance, including things like open communication, boundary setting, support, and succession planning, just to name a few. A successful farm or ranch often combines the strength of family relationships with the discipline of a well-managed business. So today's webinar will focus on communicating with families who are involved in business together, as well as with those outside of the business. And to present, we're glad to be joined by Shannon Sand, an agricultural economist with Nebraska Extension and the Center for Ag Profitability, who's based in North Platte. We invite you to submit any questions you have as we go during her presentation. You can do that through the Q&A panel or the chat, and we'll ask those to Shannon at the end of her presentation. So I will turn it over to you, Shannon.
Sounds good. Thank you, Ryan. All right. Can you see my screen?
Looks
We're good. Okay. All right. So I'm going to talk to you today about family versus business relationships. So first off, a big thank you to the North Central Extension Risk Management Education Center and the USDA National Institute of Food and Agriculture for funding this part of this webinar series. So big thank you to them. But we're going to talk about family versus business relationships. So just a quick overview. We're going to talk about some of the unique dynamics of family-owned ag businesses, family versus business roles, and then challenges and strategies in managing family versus business relationships. And I do want to say there's probably a lot more we could cover here, but we kind of have a limited time that is available. So, and there are more webinars related to these topics that will be coming out in the future. So, ag as a family business. So, according to the USDA Farm Census, 97.4% of farms and ranches in Nebraska are family owned, and more than 9,000 farm families have received the Axarben Foundation's Pioneer Award, which recognizes families who have held continuous ownership of their operation for at least 100 years. In addition, more than 100 families have received the Heritage Farm Award, which honors those with a family owned farm for at least 150 years. Okay. All right. So I kind of want to start with some positive aspects of family relationships in business. We grew up with these people, and I'm just going to say I'm going to be generalizing, but I am from a farm and ranch family. But there's strong trust and loyalty. We grew up with these people. They're our parents, our cousins, our aunts and uncles. We know all their good, their bad, and everything in between. So there's generally a strong trust and loyalty with our family members and these family business relationships. There's shared values and visions, again, because you kind of grew up together. So you have a general idea of what you're hoping to see for the future. And then I think a really important one is that emotional connection to the land and the legacy of that land and that farm business and that family to continue into the future. So, some challenges which are unique to farm and ranch family businesses. Role ambiguity. I'm going to give you kind of a light example here, but I think of myself and my younger brother. Our job after school growing up was to feed the cows. It didn't matter which one of us did it or if we both did it together, whatever. But I guarantee you, if I recall anything from my childhood, it is the argument my younger brother and I used to have every day after school. It's your day. No, it's your day. No, it's your day. Uh, that role ambiguity on whose day it was to make that decision and feed the cows. But there's also, again, much more serious versions of that. Like, I thought you were in charge of doing the East Field versus the West Field. I thought I was making the decisions for this. So that role ambiguity can really present some challenges for farm and ranch families and businesses. So then there's a potential conflict over personal versus business priorities. So again, oftentimes now I really love going to my nieces and nephews and great nieces and nephews and cousins, what they're involved in their personal lives, whether that's a game, a gymnastics competition, I mean, you name it, versus those business priorities of this field needs to get planted this week because the weather's good. So again, there can be those potential conflicts over those personal versus business priorities. Succession planning difficulties, that's a real one. That communication of how we are transitioning over the operation. Is it being sold? Are we parceling? How are we transferring over those decision making abilities? And then intergenerational ownership. More than one and sometimes more than two generations own an operation or different aspects of it. Who owns the equipment? Who owns the land? Who's paying the leases on the land? Who's got water? I mean, that can be a whole presentation in and of itself, I feel like. And then the involvement of multiple family members. So, we're going to talk about a few common conflicts and some of those things and what they mean, what we're talking about here. Relinquishing versus retaining control. So, it's that internal emotional struggle that senior operators often face as they are stepping away from the farm livelihood. And it's a big part of their own personal identity. Oftentimes, again, you've been doing this 30, 40, 50, 60 years potentially. And if you're looking at stepping away from that, that's a big part of your personal identity. And how do you separate or move that? I mean, there's a lot of different options. When I work with people, oftentimes I say, what is your favorite part about your job? So I'm just going to give an example really quick. My dad has made the decision to transfer management decisions over the last few years to my older sister for the cows. And my dad gets to continue doing his favorite part, which is rotating the cows every day to the different fields and checking them out. Again, he doesn't have to worry about any of those management decisions because he didn't enjoy those in the first place, but he gets to do what he wants to do. So, the other thing is potential common conflicts, being fair versus doing what is right. So it's a struggle to balance the care of the family with the desire to preserve the farm as a viable business. Again, some of those things it's really difficult to deal with, can be common conflicts. Profit versus affordability. This is a big one that potentially for the next year or so, I think could be even more contentious than it has been. It's that tension between the financial needs of a senior operator and their heirs' financial capacity to buy out and operate the operation. Just given cost of production, expectation for prices this fall, depending on your operation and what you're doing, that could be a real conflict and an area of potential contention. Explicit versus implicit communication is a big one. So, the need to openly talk about the farm's future, oftentimes we all kind of see it going into perpetuity, but not actually having those discussions can be a big thing. Fighting the urge to make assumptions about the future and not talk about money, it's a thing that happens, and sometimes we're just making assumptions that we think people know what's gonna happen when they have no idea. So that explicit versus implicit communication. And then progress versus continuity. So it can be the struggle between doing things as they have always been done and trying something new to keep the farm adaptive and profitable. And I really think that, especially over the last 20 years, particularly with regards to farming and even ranching in the last decade, the change in technology use, that's immediately what my mind goes to. I mean, that has really changed the game for a lot of operators, whether that's a software or GPS. As I like to say, if my 82-year-old dad now uses GPS in the tractor, I was like, I mean, that's just the amazing changes in terms of the data, the information, and what can be done with some of that stuff. Okay. So, a family business can have several different types of stakeholders. We're really talking about three here. So, you can have family members, non-family member, non-family, non-manager owners, and then non-family members. And within those, The linkages among these stakeholder groups may be illustrated using this three-circle family business system model. So, one person, as you can see in the center here, may very well be in all three circles. Now, you may need a second to wrap your head around how that's possible, but if a family member who also is an owner of a large chunk of land may lease to a niece or nephew, they could very well be in all three of those if they're still operating and working on the operation. So, again, it depends on the situation, right? So, one person could be in all three, one person could be in two of those circles, or you may just be in one. So, not all family members may have business ownership or management roles, and an individual's role within the system will affect their expectations from the business. For example, family members are entitled to love and acceptance. Owners are entitled to a return on their investment, and employees are entitled to fair compensation for their labor and expertise. So, conflict in family businesses often stems from blurred lines between family and business roles here, right? So, clear communication among family operations and ownership circles can mitigate this issue. By discussing roles and expectations, individuals can better understand their place within the business and the necessary steps for transitioning roles. Hierarchical family structures can really hinder open communication in business at times. So, to foster a collaborative environment, you want to really encourage all family members to share ideas and actively engage in discussions. This can help to empower younger generations and prepare them for future leadership roles. So, this is just another example of that same model that I discussed previously here, just a different way to look at it because I recognize not everybody kind of gets the idea behind that three circle family business model. This is just a different way to view that. So, some challenges with separating family versus business. I mean, this can be really difficult, right? It's important to try and keep the family relationships independent from the farm and the operations relationships. Your operation might struggle in this area if family members are expected to work without compensation or earn less than what they could elsewhere. Other red flags may include things like promising family members jobs within the business, regardless of their qualifications or experience, and prioritizing the opinions of family members over those non family members, family employees, sorry, over those non family employees, owners, or other stakeholders. So, here are a few ideas because I want strategies on how if this is a challenge on how do I separate family versus business roles, right? So, create business goals and family goals, two separate lists. Now, there may be some overlap between family goals and business goals, right? Again, there there are we want to try and keep it as separate as possible, but there's going to be some blurring of the lines. Let's be realistic here. Um, However, each should have independent goals and related milestones. So, if the owner or operator is wanting to transition the operation, then evaluating a farm or a ranch transfer plan is going to be really important. The plan should describe how to delegate managerial responsibility slowly to the next generation. It should also allow business assets to transfer without placing a family member or the business at risk of financial ruin. Again, we all know what prices are expected to be this fall. So, having a lot of those discussions, you might need to slow down your transfer plan or speed it up depending on your situation. So, again, having a lot of those discussions are going to be really important. Separate business checking accounts and personal expenses for all family members. Again, I know this can be sometimes a difficult task depending on the operation, but it is really important. And it is even more important, especially if you get audited. Separate business checking accounts really help to keep it clean when you can separate that from those family living expenses. So, and then develop job descriptions for everyone who works on the operation. The description set perform The descriptions will set performance expectations and add clarity to family business work arrangements. cap.unl.edu actually has an entire webinar discussing how to develop job descriptions and then more information on onboarding employees. Uh, Value and compensate family members fairly for their labor that they provide on the operation, and then recognize when family members take on more or fewer responsibilities, and then revise those wages accordingly. So, some challenges, another challenge is communication. So, lack of communication about how those family roles overlap with business roles. Again, we try to keep it separated, but there's going to be some blurring of the lines. So, things like, have you discussed the contents of your will or trust with family? I know it is an uncomfortable discussion for a lot of people, but it is one that needs to take place and happen. Do you assume a family member's knowledge of the business based on their family role? Um, do you also assume they know where everything is at? Do they know where the bills are or when the bills are due? Is there a binder that has like all of the important information on, again, when bills are due, when things need to be paid, when the insurance is due? A lot of that stuff, people kind of assume you have an idea of where it's at, but I don't know about y'all, but I am not psychic and I just don't know what I don't know. So do not assume that everybody knows where everything is. I think of this example. We had a new baby born in my family and I went home to visit, and I haven't lived at my parents' house in almost 20 years, and they asked me to go get the tractor keys. They bought that tractor 4 years ago. I had no idea where those tractor keys were. And so, again, you're just assuming that I know where it's at, but I haven't lived here in 20 years. I'm not exactly sure where anything is sometimes, to be fair. So, again, that's just a simple, silly example of, we don't know what we don't know. So don't assume everybody, even if they're on farm kids or on operation children or nieces and nephews, know where everything is, know exactly what everything is going on. Um, think about it. Have you ever felt uncertain about your role in the family business due to lack of communication? Do you just assume you're going to inherit a specific amount of land or money when a family member or business owner dies? These questions highlight really common issues in a family business. It's just that lack of clear communication about those roles and expectations. If family businesses fail to address these sorts of confusing issues, it can lead to conflict and negatively impact both family and business dynamics. And I don't know about y'all, but it's really important to me personally that I be able to have, holiday dinners with my family in the future. So, okay, some ideas on how to resolve this lack of communication. Right. Complete or update your family business system cycle, whatever. You can use at the bottom corner here, you can use this what is it? This three system business model or three family business system to reflect roles in your farm business. So you can use that as a way to help better define what's going on in your operation. Discuss the farm business's future in specific terms at a family council meeting, not a family business meeting. These are two different things, by the way. A family council meeting. In it, you're going to address who will or will not receive income or land upon a senior operator's passing, and describe under what circumstances a will or trust may be revised. Because keep in mind, you want to have at least one annual meeting related to this a year if you can, or every other year at the worst, because things do change and you will potentially need to update or revise your will. Again, you know, we don't expect our children to pass before us, but sometimes that does happen. Family members who own the business or work as a farm employee should also write down the business roles they want in the future and outline what they can contribute to the business. The senior operators then should reflect on these statements and then hold a family business meeting to discuss the differences in their perceptions and the desire of others. So, again, what you see actually happening versus what they see actually happening in terms of their jobs. This can also lead to adjusting an individual's roles within that three circle model of the family's business. So, Some additional challenges can be imposing family roles in business matters. So, again, decision making in a farm business should align with skills and expertise of owners and employees. When many owners are also family members, there's that risk of reverting to that family based hierarchy that can harm the business sometimes. So, some examples, and I'm sure y'all could probably think of way more than I can, but patriarchal rules. So, the oldest generation makes all the decisions. So, mom and dad are always right. Dismissive parents. So, parents just ignore their children's business concerns or ideas or potential options for expansion in the future. Um, Fear of disapproval. So that's when children are avoiding expressing their opinions due to a fear of judgment. And then sibling bias. So this one's kind of an interesting one, but sometimes the older siblings' views are prioritized over younger siblings depending on the age difference. So, some ideas on how to resolve these family roles in business is if it's needed, it's not always needed. Um, But you can seek professional help. And what I mean with that is business disagreements can lead to conflict or communication breakdowns among family business stakeholders. So, family related conflicts can also hinder business relationships and communications within operations. Um, so if you need it, don't be afraid to hire an external consultant to facilitate a series of family business meetings. And the facilitator should be neutral and coach the family on how to practice active listening skills. So while I teach this and I work with people and I facilitate and I've mediated a lot, when it comes to your own family and you're in the situation, sometimes it's a very different situation, right? The other thing is assuming that all members in the family business system are willing to talk to one another. If you're then, set expectations that everyone should provide input and ask questions during a family business meeting. We always say in our family, because two siblings chatter more and then two are much more quieter, introverted people, silence is consent. So that's a family, like that's like a ground rule we have set in our operation. So again, set expectations, set boundaries, set ground rules, um, that everybody needs to provide input. Now, you might need to have a few minutes to think about it or even like come back to it later because everybody's processing is different in how they do that. But again, if you need to set those rules, expectations, and things like that, make sure everybody has some format, some way to have input. So, some other challenges could be setting milestones. So, failures to set milestones and timelines for changeover. A farm should really have a plan for succession and leadership development. So, and I say succession and leadership development together because you really do want to, whoever your successor or successors, depending on the case, are, you want to help develop their, leadership, their management skills, their HR related skills, all of those things. But decentralizing decision making authority across generations can help to increase the likelihood of long term success of the operation. If the primary decision makers have not outlined a transition plan, family and non family owners or managers may be unclear about their future with the operation or how to contribute to its growth. So, poor communication can also lead to uncertainty among stakeholders regarding business transition decisions. So, ideas on how to resolve setting milestones for for role changes. So, review current job descriptions and assigned responsibilities every year to determine when someone has earned a different role within the business. Oftentimes, if you think about that within the operation, sometimes we change roles and we don't even discuss it, but it just kind of happens because it needs to happen. And so it happens naturally. So, really reviewing those job descriptions on an annual basis to be like, hey, I'm really making more decisions on like related to our corn crop than I was before. Maybe we need to readjust this job description so that everything is reflected appropriately. Things like that. Really going through and checking over those job descriptions. And like I said, sometimes it just kind of happens naturally or by accident that ends up what happening. But like going through and then recognizing and rewriting that job description for that person if needed, that's going to be important so that again everybody who's earned someone who has earned a different role within that business, it gets recognized. We know that's what it is. So there's less conflict likely later on. Um, Review the steps and or timeline to transfer your operation in terms of management and decision making responsibilities, and then assess how far your operation has moved through the process. So I want to say, I really look at this reviewing the steps and timeline. You should be doing this while you're doing this, and it doesn't happen all at once. Especially if we can avoid it, we would rather it happen over time, slowly, so that through that transition, you really have the opportunity to train your manager or your leader or your heir or heirs and like make sure that they're on the right path, hopefully. And then, they're bringing in new ideas. You're bringing in new ideas. It's a real, I don't want to say synergistic, but that's the only word that comes to mind. A synergistic, approach. And the other thing is, when you go through it, it's gonna change. There's gonna be times when they're gonna need to take over more and make more decisions, and there's gonna be times when maybe you'll take it back. And again, those discussions, that ebbs and flows of that process, have a plan so that you can review it and be like, "Hey, we need to change it," because it does happen and it will change throughout time. But it also, again, it provides that time for your successor or manager to really learn and help increase that, the operations chance for long-term success. And then schedule family business meetings that include non-family owners and employees so that they feel like they get a say. They know what's happening because oftentimes it's family business meetings, but sometimes again, we needed to just schedule meetings with our family owners and then employees to include them to let them know what is happening because sometimes they just have no idea. So, some strategies for improving employee and family retention, because this is a big one, because sometimes you do have those conflicts so big to the point where your family never speaks to you again. They work for a completely different operation. They leave, you know, agriculture altogether. So, to really do our best to make sure, again, we we improve or keep that employee and family retention. So, make it optional. So, and what I mean by that is, and I think most people don't do this anymore. Um, don't require your kid to come back if that's not something they're interested in, which again, I think most people don't necessarily do that anymore. And the other thing is, and I've worked with a lot of different operations between here and further out west. And the ones that I've seen that are most successful in their transfer of ownership is when they require the heir or heirs to work off farm for a period of time for another operation. So I worked with a dairy before, and after his girls graduated from college, he required them to work at least 5 years at other operations. Part of that was just, again, learning to work under someone else, but also gaining, in their cases, oftentimes they ended up in leadership or management roles, but they were able to, again, you come back with kind of fresh new ideas, but you know how the system works. And then you can go back to the family operation and really bring some additional different perspectives to it. So, I always think that's a nice idea when you can swing that. Shared vision and values, have those discussions, make sure everybody's on the same page that this is the business's vision and values. This is what we have set out. And then again, have that timeline for transition if there is one. And then if there isn't, what are the other options that we have happening that we could work into this? Really, overall, it's just be proactive. So, proactive communication is going to allow families to move from inaction to finding and implementing innovative solutions, right? Building a yearly schedule of family business and council meetings and engaging your external advisors and experts can really help a family begin to talk more openly about the operation's future. Farm and ranch families have a variety of different coping mechanisms to address conflict during farm transfer. So, I'm going to give you a few here. Some of these are not the best coping mechanisms, but let's be honest, at some point we've probably all done them. Stalling, which is postponing the farm transfer process to avoid conflict, delaying key decision making until a senior operator dies. Denial, which is ignoring conflicts and refusing to engage in conversations about farm transfer. And then segmentation, which is prioritizing some aspects of the transfer. And my brain has prioritizing some aspects of farm transfer over others. So it could be things like modernization, or are we transferring assets? What's happening? Setting boundaries for what topics to discuss or who is allowed to discuss them at business meetings, depending on, again, who is in the family, who is in the operation, may be a useful tool. Integration, so surfacing conflicts, that means like knowing what's the issue and then seeking more information or expertise to develop strategies that can address those conflicts. So if you have two kids that really argue and fight all day long like dogs, figuring out what's going on, how do we address this? How can we fix this? How can we help them seek some sort of resolution amongst themselves? And then reaffirmation, openly acknowledging conflicts that exist and committing to find a solution. So here's just an example of how to acknowledge a conflict. Assume a family transferring the farm will not equally divide assets because the family wants to recognize another family member's sweat equity. So if you have a brother or sister that's been on the operation 20 or 30 years and they've been helping to, again, run that operation and farm it, that sweat equity could potentially count depending on how the the parents or the owners decide to divvy it up. It does, however, they do also may have they may also, however, desire to financially support all of the family's children. So that operations is going to have to change significantly in order to stay in the family for another 100 years. Family members need to be are willing to ask in this case, what must we do in order to make sure that this operation is viable for 100 years? I'm an off-farm kid and that's a question I've asked my parents. So again, having that reaffirmation is really helpful in some of these cases. And then don't be afraid to ask for help. Good communication can solve and prevent a lot of conflict. Families should really be proactive and seek professional expertise from a family business advisor or a trained facilitator if issues arise that the family is unable to resolve or accept, or if reoccurring issues prevent the family from moving forward with a decision. An experienced outsider can really help to address some of these root causes of conflict for the family. Um, Again, if you're really unable to address conflict through communication, the Department of Ag has some options for you in terms of mediation services available. There's also the farm hotline, which I've listed here, and their 1-800 number is below as well. But mediation services for ag related issues are available to farmers and ranchers in most states. And they can be anything from situations between tenants and landlords. So, again, it could be aunts and uncles and nieces and nephews, or moms and dads and kids, borrowers and lenders, one neighbor to another. It could be, again, the parents to children, family. There's a lot of different things that mediation can really help as a form of dispute resolution if it's needed. So, in conclusion, everybody's got a unique family owned ag business. At least most of y'all, I'm assuming, that are on this call. Everybody's situation's different. I mean, the steps are kind of similar, but the roadmap to get where you're going is going to be different for everybody. And it's also probably going to change. Um, it's really important to do that careful planning, set those business meetings, set those family council meetings, and have those discussions with everybody, both family and non-family employees, as well as non-family owners. And then just communication, communication, communication is going to be the key. Um, if you'd like to get a hold of, well, any of us, you can get a hold of all of us through cap.unl.edu. But on your screen right now should be listed all of the regional ag economists as well as our farm and ranch analyst, because she is amazing. But with that, if there are any questions, I will take those now.